The ICC's Future Tour programs, or FTP for short, for the cycle of 2023 to 2027 is doing the rounds in certain news organizations, and well, they always say that the devil is in the detail, but in the case of the FTP for this particular cycle, it's more about what's not written than about what is actually written. For you see, the FTP does of course spell out what exactly each country will be doing in terms of bilateral series, and they'll also be talking about exactly the number of games to be played in certain tours and stuff like that. I'm sure you know about what the FTP entails, but this time's Future Tours program has something very, very interesting when it comes to domestic T20 franchise leagues. And the simple fact of the matter is that there is a gap in the calendar of every major country which plays cricket and also has a T20 franchise league of its own. So in essence, a video that we at Sports Today, and which I had also been a part of, we had done, where we spoke about there being more of a focus now on T20 franchise leagues over bilateral series, is essentially also now being spelled out not just by South Africa pulling out of a bilateral tour, but also by the FTP itself, because as I said, there is a nice gap there for leagues around the world, which of course means that as time goes on, there is a potential that T20 franchise leagues will be gaining more and more importance. Hello everyone, welcome to this live video on the FTP. My name as always is Shane Dias, and we are going to look at the details in this case about how exactly it is that franchise T20 leagues are gaining so much prominence, that it's not just the IPL now, but even other leagues that are taking out time from their domestic, from their international calendars to focus on the domestic leagues. Now, first off, let's talk about the big daddy of them all, the IPL. Now, in the IPL, we note for a fact that for the most part, there's very little bilateral cricket that takes place in the window in which the IPL is normally played. That's been the case for quite some time now. That's not exactly newsworthy, but what is that the new, in the current, the forthcoming FTP, the cycle will actually end up being for 2 weeks more than what it normally was, which of course hints at the fact that there is going to be an expansion in IPL games. And again, that's not something that's much of a secret. If you followed our coverage during the time of the media rights auction taking place, there were hints made at that point that as of now, the BCCI is not really going to increase the number of games, but with time going on, in the end of that 5-year cycle or 10-year cycle, there will in fact be an increase in the number of IPL games. So that means that the unofficial window of sorts that is put in place at that time has grown, so there will be more time given to the IPL, because of course there are going to be more games to be scheduled. That of course has been something that we aren't really that surprised about, because it was really inevitable given the importance of the IPL to cricket players around the world. But that's not just it. After all, why should the other two members of cricket's big three miss out on the fun in this case? Because, well, the 100 and the BBL, the Big Bash League, are also set to get their own windows. And of course, it's not a window in terms of the ICC's granting it to them, because of course we have to remember that the ICC hasn't officially granted the IPL a window either. But the Australian and English cricket boards have kept as little bilateral cricket as possible during the times in which they expect the 100 to be played, as well as during the time in which the BBL is normally played. Now, of course, this is something that has been something of a problem for them, because again, neither of these tournaments really stop international cricket taking place, particularly for even the host nations, because of course England more often than not have played bilateral series which are running parallel to the 100. Of course, the 100 is a very new tournament, but it reigns true for other tournaments as well. But the same can be said about the BBL, because even the BBL, one of the biggest criticisms of it is at times it is missing the top international Australian stars, and that is not necessarily down to them wanting to miss it. It's simply down to the fact that they have international commitments which they cannot pull out of under any circumstances. But in the FTP, which is upcoming, there is going to be less of a focus on bilateral series happening during the time when the BBL is taking place, something that Cricket Australia's CEO Nick Hockley had hinted at in the past. In fact, we note for a fact that even with South Africa pulling out of the ODI series set to be held early next year, the Australian board sees their own benefit in that as well. It means that their star players will be available for the Big Bash League, and that's obviously a bit of a bonus because it could potentially boost viewership both on TV and in the stadium as well. But in this case, it's not just the big three who are, kind of carving their own little niches in the cricket calendar, because well, any nation with a T20 league is actually doing the exact same thing as we are going to be talking about here, because of course the Caribbean Premier League, we note for a fact, happens normally during August, September. That's generally speaking a time when there's not a lot of international cricket taking place for the West Indies, so they've blocked off that window for themselves. The Bangladesh Premier League, generally speaking, takes place in the beginning of the new year, so January times. Remember, the Cricket South Africa, the reason they pulled out of that tour of Australia is because they were launching their new T20 league, for which they wanted all of their players to be available, and that will be taking place in a January and February window, and that will potentially also be competing with the International League T20, which, as we remember, is the new league that was launched by the UAE Cricket Board. So there's going to be two leagues going on during that point in time, and of course the one key name that's missing from here is the PSL, or the Pakistan Super League. Now the Pakistan Super League doesn't really have a fixed window in that regard, but that too is mostly due to the fact that they are trying to schedule it in and around or before the holy month of Ramzan, because generally speaking Ramzan is a time where corporates are spending heavy on ads, so would be less likely to spend on cricket. So obviously they don't want to be holding the tournament in and around the same time. They want it to be finishing before that. So obviously there's no fixed time period for that, but even there they've generally speaking tried to schedule it before Ramzan. Of course, a few years down the line, Pakistan will be hosting the Champions Trophy as well, so obviously that does play up a little bit of havoc. But generally speaking, as you can see, the simple fact of the matter is that all boards are in their own way prioritizing the T20 format, and in fact not just the T20 format, but also the domestic franchise leagues that all of them have started. The focus quite clearly is on that, given that it's a short span of cricket which generates a lot of income, a lot of exposure, and potentially sets up boards financially for the future. Now the real question that of course we had asked ourselves, or asked recently even before, when it comes to the future of international cricket, is that do you think, or do we feel that in the future T20 franchise leagues will be given more importance over bilaterals? Now I have to go out there and say that as things stand, it's far too early to be sounding the death knell for bilateral cricket just yet. Again, remember, even BCCI President Sourav Ganguly has said in the past that they want to be playing bilateral series as well, because it's important to give back to other nations and to share that wealth to ensure that the well-being of cricket is taken care of around the world. But quite simply what we can see in front of us tells us a whole different story, because while yes, again, bilaterals haven't been completely ruled out at this point, but there is a growing focus on each country having their own T20 league and trying to nurture it and ensure that it is a money spinner in the vein of the IPL. So it can be said that whilst we're not exactly at a point where we can declare bilateral series to be dead, we are very much reaching a point where where T20 leagues, franchise leagues, will be just as important to the coffers of the various cricket boards, if not more important than what bilateral series are, because again, it's not just about the fact that these are money draws in terms of they draw attention, and of course, franchise T20 leagues are all the rage, but it's also the fact that you're squeezing in a lot of cricket in a shorter period of time and you're not spreading it out over the year. Remember, cricket is a sport which in essence now has no real off season, so you filled in that off season, and the off season has been filled, or the place of that has been taken, generally speaking, by franchise leagues. So very much we are at that stage now where franchise T20 leagues are not just something that happens on the side, but it is front and center in the thinking of all cricket boards, and whether or not we like it, that is exactly how things are going to be, because the future is now, and that means that franchise T20 leagues are going to be given just as much, if not more importance, because of the kind of revenue they generate and have the potential to generate. Now, this will be the end of this particular video, but thank you all so much for for joining me. If you enjoy what it is that we do, please don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave us a comment. I mean, do you think that this continued focus on T20 leagues is a bad thing and will harm cricket, or do you think that it is a necessary step which boards will be taking to secure their and the sport's financial future? Do drop us a comment and let us know. Last but not the least, please don't forget to download the AajTak app for all the latest news, sporting updates in whatever language it is of your choice. As always, I've been Shane Dias. Thanks once again for joining us, and I will see you very soon. Bye bye for now.